So I see that the statue of Queen Victoria has been vandalised in Leeds. Um, I believe this is at Roundhead Park. I'm not sure. It's one of the big parks in Leeds. Um, Queen Victoria is one of the more common statues around the country, along with Sir Robert Peel and some other figures. There are numerous statues of Queen Victoria. There's one close to where I live, in Tynemouth. Um, But here's the bit that got me. Some of the graffiti included slave owner, racist, and the usual sort of rhetoric that you would expect from these movements. Some people have said Black Lives Matter aren't responsible. Well, unless they denounce it as vandalism, or unless they say they didn't sanction that particular act, then I'm afraid they're going to be seen as responsible because they drew up the list of 60 targets across the country of historic figures that they associate with racism. But here's the thing, we need to look at facts, okay, regarding Queen Victoria's life. Queen Victoria was born in 1819. She ascended the throne in 1837 at the age of 19, and at that time, slavery had already been abolished in the British Empire for 4 years. It was abolished in 1833 across the empire. It had already been abolished from British ports, I understand, in 1807, okay? A generation before she was even born. Um, as for racism, well, if you're going to charge that at Queen Victoria, then charge it at every Victorian, basically, because at the time, Um, there were racialist views, that's true. There were white supremacist views, no question about it. Even among polite society, even among liberal circles, there was a general prevailing Victorian view that the white race was superior. It was racist, right? By today's standards, absolutely. But here's the interesting thing about Queen Victoria. For all her reputation as being a dour old woman, widow of Windsor, a cantankerous and distant, cold figure, um, she was actually not quite what the stereotype makes her out to be. I've read numerous articles on Queen Victoria. I've done research. It turns out that actually she was quite forward thinking in some ways. An example of this is the relationship with her Indian valet, Abdul Karim. This was the subject of a film starring Judi Dench, made a few years ago. The film unfortunately didn't do well. In my opinion, it was very misunderstood. Far from promoting the British Empire, the film was actually quite clever, and anyone who actually bothered to watch it would see that it wasn't glorifying the empire. If anything, it was attacking the racism within the empire. Because this man Abdul Karim did get quite a lot of abuse from household staff, and some of that was racial. Some of it was also just personal grudges because they felt he was being a bit of an upstart and exerting overdue influence. And there was, let's say, workplace tensions going on, but no doubt some of it was racial in nature. Queen Victoria's response was a furious rebuke of her household staff for the racial issues. That hardly sounds like some sort of white supremacist position. Um, so aside from the fact she couldn't have owned slaves, it would have been impossible given the time frame. Um, the idea she was racist. I've no doubt Queen Victoria would have had some positions that would be politically incorrect by today's standards, probably even some racist positions. But I think you have to look at her in the context of the time. This is not to say that her legacy cannot be debated, criticised. It's not to say that Queen Victoria is above criticism. I don't believe anyone is. But I think she's being targeted as the figurehead of the largest empire in human history. Um, you think Queen Victoria, you think British Empire. And that's a real pity because it's a distortion of the facts. Her stance on the American Civil War, along with Prince Albert, at this time, we were beyond absolute monarchy, so the Queen couldn't openly take political stances. Early in her reign, that had actually caused some scandals, the bedchamber crisis. But so this was at the point long after the Glorious Revolution. She was a constitutional monarch. Great statesmen of the day like Palmerston and Gladstone and Disraeli and others. Um, in some ways had the real power. Victoria was the figurehead. But she supposedly, I don't know if this is true, but it wouldn't honestly surprise me, given what I know about her record. She supposedly wept when she read Uncle Tom's Cabin, published in the 1850s by, I believe it was Harriet Beecher Stowe. She wept. During the American Civil War, the United Kingdom had to say neutral. Well, it was officially neutral. I think morally, there was certainly pro-Union sentiments. Prince Albert, of course, was of German descent. There was a large German-American contingent in on both sides, but particularly on the Union side. Prince Albert was very much a forward-thinking man. He was a man of science. He was a man of thought and reason. Um, and both Victoria and Albert, I believe, were genuinely uncomfortable about Southern slavery, but they just couldn't come out and say we oppose this outright because that would have been seen as interfering in America's Civil War. There were, of course, a number of close run situations where our neutrality was really tested, not least the incident at Liverpool Bay between the Monitor and the Merrimac, and also I may be getting my history wrong with that one. I know there was a standoff at Liverpool Bay. Maybe it wasn't the Monitor and the Merrimac. I think that was another engagement by mistake. But put it this way, our neutrality was tested numerous times. We did have strong economic trade links with the South. So I suppose you could say the British government was complicit in that side of it. But the idea that Queen Victoria was a slave owner is beyond rubbish. And that is why these moralistic protests are, in my opinion, getting out of hand. Um, by the way, a building in Liverpool, the University of Liverpool, which was named in honour of William Ewart Gladstone, who was born in Liverpool, was renamed. The rationale for this was that early in his career, Gladstone did defend the slave trade. It's less noble side of his record. He did. This was because he came from a slave owning family. He didn't personally own slaves, but his family did. Point with that is it was early in his career and history can judge him. He was on the wrong side of history. But does that mean his many extensive achievements should be overlooked? Home rule for Ireland, major reforms of the civil service, major increases in male suffrage. Gladstone is rightly seen as one of our greatest prime ministers. Where is this going to end? Are we going to look at every historic figure and look at the negative side of the record, then just totally demolish their entire legacies? I think that's wrong. So the people who vandalised this Queen Victoria statue, and I don't think it will be the last such case, they need to start off by getting their facts right. Um, Even if they graffitied and said, head of the British Empire, responsible for bloodshed in India, something like that, it would at least be more accurate, somewhat, than saying that she was a slave owner. Um, that's just rubbish. But that's why it's a problem because the people who are doing this don't seem to care too much about the facts. They're going out in this cultural revolution, and that's what I basically think it has become. And where do we draw the line? I think that councils and police need to be showing that they are enforcing the law. If there is cause to remove statues, like I said in the previous video, if there is popular support, then there may be a rationale to bring them down formally by in the correct way, like the statue of Robert Milligan was in the West India Key. But just vandalising statues is vandalism. Whatever way you gloss it over, that's what it is, and it's an offence. Um, so I think the culprits who done this should face consequences, whether a fine, whether they should be made to clean it up. I don't know. I don't know what sort of spray paint they're using. Hopefully that will be able to be repaired. But if they take down the statue of one of our greatest monarchs as a response to this, basically caving into mob rule, that would be an utter travesty. And I'm seeing a lot of councils are now virtue signalling and suggesting that they will take down statues. Sadiq Khan in London has launched a commission to make statues across London more diverse. Well, I have no problem with historic Black and Asian figures being recognised, hence increasing more diversity. Gay rights campaigners, other civil rights campaigners, that's great. But let's not just rewrite history and just tear down statues or vandalise statues. Um, because whatever way you look at it, it's vandalism. Um, but with this particular incident with the Queen Victoria statue in Leeds, it is factually not true. The charges they were making against her about her being a slave owner, it's rubbish.